Okay, hello everybody and a very warm welcome to Kettle's Yard this evening. My name's Jenny and I'm the Head of Collection and Programme here at Kettle's Yard. And it's a beautiful day, we're delighted to see you. This was a hot ticket, I have to say, because the lecture sold out after about 2 days, so well done. And before I introduce our speaker this evening, who's going to come down the stairs hopefully in a moment, a few quick housekeeping things. Please could everybody turn their mobile phones off if you haven't already. The exit is where you came through the door. There will be a wine reception after this talk, and you're all very welcome to join us for that. And we're also filming the lecture this evening, so just to make you aware of that. And we really would like to take your questions after the talk. Antony has said to me that that's his favourite part, so he's really hoping that you will ask him some questions. So we'll take those afterwards. I hope you've all had a chance to see our exhibition this evening, Subject, which Sir Antony Gormley has devised especially for us at Kettle's Yard. And I'm not really going to speak about the exhibition because I'm sure you'd much rather hear from Antony, but just to say that it really has been a privilege to work with Antony and his studio over the last 2 years in thinking about what this installation and exhibition might become. It's been through many iterations, and there's been really interesting and lively discussion about what might occupy the galleries. And I think what really has struck me throughout the whole process is that Antony never really wanted to kind of present a retrospective or work that kind of looked back. He's always looking forward in his own practice, and so he wanted to create something which was new for the site and really engaged with the new spaces here and Jamie Faubert's architecture. So that was kind of core to his developing ideas, which I'm sure he'll talk about more. And we really couldn't be more delighted that it is Antony who is the first solo artist to occupy our new spaces. Antony has given a couple of talks actually for our staff here already, and in those he really tried to emphasize that this exhibition really doesn't exist without you. It doesn't exist until the viewer occupies the spaces themselves and almost becomes the subject of the show. So we really hope that you will enjoy it. Antony, would you like to come down? So Antony needs very little introduction. He has exhibited all over the world, and some of his key, more recent exhibitions include an exhibition at the Long Museum in Shanghai last year, the Fort Belvedere in Florence in 2015, which Andrew and I were privileged to go and see, and the exhibition at the Hayward Gallery in 2007, which some of you may have seen, and I think we will see some images from that show tonight. And I think we are still right in claiming for ourselves that this is Antony's first major show in a public gallery since the Hayward show. So Antony was a student here in Cambridge, of course, studying anthropology, archaeology, and art history. And his public sculptures, the most well-known of which is the Angel of the North, probably, can also be discovered in locations all over the world. So from Crosby Beach in Liverpool to Australia, to the Netherlands, to the USA, and back to our own city of Cambridge. So I could go on longer, but I won't because you're here, and we'd like to hear from you. So please join me in welcoming Sir Antony Gormley.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you all for coming. I was here last night, and I think probably quite a few of you were too. Wasn't it a lovely party? It could have gone all night, but we all had to go to bed. Anyway, I think what I wanted to do is spend the first 40 minutes just talking, in a way, around the show. The show is called Subject. The question is, where is that subject? And I guess the wager of the show for me is that I think the subject of art has shifted. And I'm interested in how the making of art and indeed its reception has changed, for me personally. But I think that can be contextualized, and I could say that, for me, in the 40 years that I've been, as it were, making things, I think that the field in which I work has itself changed, and I want to talk a little bit about that. What is this show? I think this is in a way an invitation to participate, immerse yourself in a question, because I think that's what the exhibition is. It's a question. What can art be, and how can we engage with it? And I think for me the two coordinates of that's a word that'll crop up a lot tonight, or the end kind of points are, on the one hand, trying to deal objectively with the conditions of our existence and mark them somehow, and on the other, to deal with feeling. What does it feel like to be alive? And those are the poles, if you like, in which this exhibition, which is a form of asking, it's not a form of knowing, it's a form of asking, exists. And it demands a kind of risk-taking of you. And I think what Jenny said was right. I think that there's a kind of offer here, which if you don't take, you won't get anything. There's an offer. Can we look at the world through? I keep hitting this microphone by mistake. Can we look at the world through, as it were, these things or gestures or interruptions of a space that we share with them? And I think that, Andrew used that word experimental a lot last night, and I think that's really important to me, that in a sense, every opportunity of making a show has to use the facts of the nature of the exhibition space as part of its material, and to literally play with that. And I guess that is what makes it difficult for me to just use the frame of a building as a place to display previously made works, because I think that every context, in a way, offers a different kind of timbre or pitch, offers a different opportunity to work with it. That this shift, or the question of where the subject of art might lie, I think, is one that was, I have to say this every time, it was one that was announced in a way in about 1911 by Duchamp, when he talked about the viewer doing half of the work. That in a sense, this notion of art as an experimental but also experiential field, rather than the reproduction or representation of the known, I think was, in a sense, it is an old story, and it's been around for well over 100 years. But the problem that I set myself was, how do you bring back the body as the vehicle for feeling in a way, in a time that has gained by everything that happened in the 100 years of modernism. And the answer to that has been, I want to bring back the body not as an object of idealization or representation, but as a place of indwelling, the primary place of our consciousness. And to do that, I just decided to use the only bit of the material world that I happen to inhabit, which is my body. Nothing special about my body, but it is the thing that I was given. It is my found object. I've said that a lot. This dialogue with Duchamp is quite a important one, because on many levels, I think that Duchamp opened up, if you like, a kind of arena of art as a questioning, but at the same time intellectualized it at the expense of sensation and feeling. And I'm trying to reunite it. So while I take the body as my found object, I also recognize that the body has been the lost subject of modernity. And if we think, in a sense, of Mondrian as the epitome of the thrust towards pure means, in other words, vertical and horizontal lines and pure primary colors, his ambition was to make an art that was approachable, engageable with, irrespective of creed, language, cultural background. And yet, curiously, he began a, I think, story about formalism for its own sake. In other words, looking, that was taken on by Greenberg and was about looking for the syntax of art, where you get, Greenberg's kind of statements about what you see is what you get, or maybe that was Frank Stella interpreting Greenberg. And the idea that Judd puts forward, that actually an art object is an entirely independent thing that makes no reference to anything beyond itself. I think that trajectory towards formalism for its own sake, in a sense, has separated the field of art from, I think, the necessary participation of, if I put myself in the position of a viewer, of us as viewers. And that sort of allied itself with another trend that has become more and more prevalent, which is the commodification of art and its mercantile promotion. And there's been a slight collusion, I would say, between market forces and, in a way, the history of modernity, in which the very thing that Mondrian wanted, which was, and so did Brancusi, wanted, which was to make a work that was open and available to absolutely everybody, suddenly becomes recondite and specialized and sold to you at high price as an object of a unique genius to which you have the key and the sensibility to have access, which seems to me a complete denial of the whole, in a way, wonderful story of the democratization of art that you could say began with Impressionism, where art no longer had to serve the status quo, no longer had to serve the patron, no longer had to, in a way, paint pictures of kings and queens, but could talk about common experience, the way that light falls on a field of poppies. That urge to the liberation of art as an open space, enterable and engageable by anybody, is one that I want to honour. And I think, yes, to come back to this exhibition, I think that question, who is the subject of this exhibition, well, I think it is you. The exhibition doesn't start until there is a viewer to see it. I think that nobody asked for art to be privatized. It is a gift. It's an extraordinary joy and privilege to be an artist, to as it were, have the right and the potential to make these physical propositions. Can we look at the world like this? But it only makes sense when that gift is shared, and it's a curious thing that has happened in terms of we've seen the rise of institutions that in some senses have made the story more available, but at the same time art could be seen as another victim of specialization that is, I think, endemic within a developed Western culture. So I just wanted to show a few slides of the show itself, which doesn't have a lot in it, does it? It's got these high tension wires or lines made out of 6mm steel, and the idea of it right from the very beginning was somehow to play with the existing, you could say, disjunctions in the architecture. There's something wonderful about the old and the Leslie Martin bits of Kettle's Yard. They play with levels these series of volumes play with levels extraordinarily well. And I think what characterizes the Jamie Faubert new bits of Kettle's Yard is it plays with, in a way, the disjunction of volumes on a single level, so that Gallery 1 and 2 do not share a common parallel orthogonality. And that was just a key for me to be able to introduce here these two horizontals. I'd made a coordinate twice before, but only with a vertical and a horizontal line. And actually coming here and really thinking about the architecture suddenly allowed this opening up of coordinate to become a fundamental measuring of the space, but also a fundamental reaffirmation, if you like, of the three-dimensional equivalent of Mondrian's vertical and horizontal two-dimensional lines. Now, what do? Yes, they measure, but actually they're not calibrated, so that's not so important. They are, as it were, physical lines that here offer you two alternative horizons. The line that is, as it were, starting from the top of this representation starts, for me, at eye level and then goes way above eye level, actually at a level slightly above where I can reach. The other is just above my head. But I think that from the minute that you arrive in that concourse and you've got the choice of either going down the slope or going down the 3 or 4 steps to the next level, the common level of the two galleries, in a way there is this disorientation, which is how we find it difficult to accept two horizons for understandable reasons. It's tempting to feel that assurances about our world are carried by our relationship to a skyline or horizon, and that actually this sense of disorientation, or where is this a pool experience, or and have we got two levels here? Anyway, it's a subtle thing, but I think if you give yourself time, you can key into that. But there's something else going on, which is also that these two lines are at 90 degrees to each other, but they then contradict other parallels that are existing within there. So this cast concrete balustrade is at first seemingly parallel, but then is not. So this implied truth about architecture, which is that it is stable, that it is somehow following rational rules, is purposefully undermined and continues. This is a better slide. I mean, all of this is a bit ironic that you can go out there and experience this, and here I am trying to tell you about it using a two-dimensional surface. But never mind. Maybe this slide gives you some inkling of that sense of disorientation that happens when you're given two horizons that are described by lines that are 90 degrees to each other. But I think that sense of disorientation is then even greater when you arrive in Gallery 1 and you're faced in a way with the invitation to explore this body form that is both solid and porous, that allows light through it, but seems to cohere into a form. And this is obviously using exactly the same three coordinates, but now rather than measuring or activating the architecture, it is measuring the internal space, a human space within that architecture. And this work is on exactly the same orthogonal axis as coordinate, the three lines that run through the gallery. But the real point is that having been lured into the gallery, you then might turn round and see this. So here is this cross that the mind again is very keen to read as a structure, as two lines that cohere, but they don't. And this is the other point of disorientation, I think, where the lines are about 1 meter, 8 centimeters apart. And I think as you move around, what these three lines do to you is they continually question your position in relation to them, in relation to other bodies in the room, and indeed to the architecture. I guess what this is a very tight and simple way of making an immersive field. I think of them as chords, literally tuning lines for the space itself, that in some way contradict the surroundings that you have been placed in, and in others invite you to explore it, and indeed explore your own experience in relation to them. And through that, perhaps begin to think about how those axes work within your own body. And that was the point of putting edge in here. So here is it's an industrial fossil basically. It's a copy of my body standing upright, but now standing on the wall. And I think of this as a kind of fulcrum, as a lever on space at large, but then also on the building, and by implication, making you maybe again a little bit disorientated in relation to how you're standing within space. So this is a field. It's made up of 3 lines and 2 objects. The objects have mass. They also, this object has extreme mass. This is about 7.5 times the density of a living body. It's made out of iron, made out of the same material that gives this planet its magnetic field, that gives it its density, assures its trajectory through space. Now placed in a way that I think connects to dream and another way of being in the body. I just wanted to then put this exhibition in the context of, I think, the wider way that I have tried to think about the body as an abstract space beyond representation. So this is called Learning to Think, and it was the first time that I think started this investigation of, rather than the internal conditions or the anatomy of a body, thinking about how you could place the body within architecture in order to reanimate it. These are 5 body cases made out of lead that are let into holes in the ceiling. You can't see the heads. In fact, there aren't heads, but you wouldn't know that. There's another floor above. And I guess this was a way of immediately allowing the viewer's body to become the viewed for other viewers in this interchange between architecture, a sculptural investigation of that architecture, and other viewers. So I've kind of been playing this game for some time. So here is another solid body that, rather than occupying the center of a room, is sensing the room itself. So this is another 630 kilo body form pressed into the corner. In a way, the most useless bit of a room, the bit where you're sent when you're naughty as a child. I spent a lot of time in corners as a child. I got to know them quite well. This is me, in a way, going back in there and thinking about this as the condition, if you like. This is the condition of most of our lives. We know now that by the middle of this century, 75% of our species will be living within the urban field, within the urban grid. This is our condition. But can we begin to question that and articulate it in a way that makes its certainty less certain? I think that part of the game that architecture plays with us is that it is solid, that it is permanent, that it is providing us with a assured shelter. And can you admit to the fact that this is no longer a singular, unique object made by a genius, but actually just a industrially mass-produced object? So this is very much an object made in the time of mechanical reproduction. in which each piece, there are 8 of them, finds its own orientation, but you can see within it the story of its own making. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means, again, the viewer ends up being in the center of the room where perhaps, you know, the finely carved naked nymph would have existed on a plinth. But what does this do? This is another exercise, for me anyway, in destabilization. I mean, we you know, this whole idea about the permanence of our surroundings, of our context, is a myth. We know that we're traveling at the equator on our own axis at about 1,470 kilometers an hour. We're speeding around the sun, that great thermonuclear reactor in the middle of our solar system, at 104,000 kilometers an hour. But that's very small beer in terms of the journey that the sun is making and the whole of our solar system is making. In the last 5 billion years, we've done 20 circuits of our spiral galaxy. And collectively, all our sun and our planets are traveling at about 828,000 kilometers an hour. So this whole notion of stability is a delusion. And actually all of that, when put in the context of the Hubble constant that we learnt 2 weeks ago, is speeding up apparently at 9% faster than we expected. I mean, this whole idea of what is our spatial home, well, it's a big unknown, is the truth, and actually reinforcing our bodily, in a way, independence and dependence is maybe a useful thing. I just wanted to show another experiment in trying to make the viewers active participants and the viewed for other viewers. Now I'm going to try and play this as a film. Do we know how to do this? I might have to appeal to. I think it goes down here. Yeah. And then. Yeah. Look. So this was another opportunity that I was given to make a retrospective. This is the Deichtorhallen in Hamburg, but I decided to make a large painting. This is 50 meters long and 25 meters wide. It sits 7.5 meters from the floor. We used 6.5 tons of paint. It's suspended by 8 cables, and the whole thing moves about 2 meters in any direction. And the viewers can move it. The structure was an interesting one to make because you can see maybe the cables here. Actually, those two are holding. You leave by this staircase and you arrive by this, and you go out on this cantilevered walkway suspended by these two. But the whole field is held by 8 of these cables that are only, they're 18 millimeters in diameter. The underneath has acoustic holes, rather like the holes in a violin, that allows the noise of people moving on top to be heard by those passing underneath. And you can see this is it in movement. Now, what is this? I got everybody to take their shoes and socks off, so they were, as it were, receiving information through their feet. But for me, this was in a way a kind of experiment in the democratization of art. So you first of all were very aware of this acoustic field of people there were 100 people allowed on the piece at a time, and in a sense it's a democratic model because your movement affects everybody on that plane, and their movement affects you, and you can feel it through your feet, and people use this space in a great variety of ways. I mean, it was a highly polished, reflective black mirror, and yeah, if you got a friend and you moved 3 paces forward and then stopped, the whole thing would start to shift, and that's what you saw in that short clip. That the whole thing is gently swaying. But what was wonderful was the range of activities and engagements there were. Some people just wanted to lie on their backs and watch the light and the ceiling move. Others just sat as if they were on a magic carpet or having a picnic. Others, others were trying to stand on one foot while the whole thing swayed. But these two, we took all the obscured glass out at eye level all the way around the top of the vertical helm, so you could look out. And I just love these two. He's obviously pointing out to his girlfriend, bits of the town, maybe showing where he works or something. But that idea that you could turn the museum inside out, rather than it being a treasure house full of unique tiny objects or precious objects, that actually you could use this place to look out onto the world as if it were a representation. And I think that's a really important idea. I quite like us to hold on to that. Is it possible that in crossing, as it were, the threshold into the field of art, we can, in a sense, begin to look at the world itself in the manner that we might have done a Claude Lorraine painting, for example. In other words, can we begin to think about all the structures around us, not as givens, but as the potential for kind of imaginative projection. Anyway, this is another example of an attempt to make a enterable field. So this is the Wattenmeer, on the northwest coast of Schleswig-Holstein in Germany, where I installed, this is a very remarkable tide plane. It's about 7 kilometers. The tide comes in and out over 7 kilometers. This was really a project that was related. Both Bremenhaven and Cuxhaven were associated with the flight of many Jews. People, anyway, fleeing from the rise of National Socialism at the end of the Weimar Republic. And I'd originally been invited to show Field, the piece with thousands of small terracotta there. And in the end, I decided to do this. And really, it's just a meditation on, in a way, migration. The fact that is the human story. We have always been moving. We have moved. Homo erectus came out of Africa in several waves. Modern man came out of Africa, we think now, maybe 70,000 years ago, and have progressed ever further west and east. And now there is no other place to go. This piece is called Another Place. In the conviction that actually the state of this planet is our state. We and this ecosystem, this bunch of elemental conditions, is our element. And so now another place is permanently sited at Crosby Beach, a very different place to the Wattenmeer insofar as it's an industrial beach with big sewage pipes going out. There are as you can see in the middle of this photograph, there's a big oil rig coming in for refurbishment, and in the other direction you've got Birkenhead, this conning tower, big wind turbines which also exist on the horizon that the work looks out onto. But the point for me is that this too becomes a field in which the life of anybody who comes to the beach is implicated, and in some way it's in the space between the stillness and silence and materiality of these works that disappear and reappear as the tide comes in and goes out, that sort of is the point, that it is life itself and how it interacts with this place in which human time, clock time, work time is tested against the time of the tides, sidereal time, planetary time. Anyway, if that was, as it were, offering the works of man, or cultural objects, I even feel slightly nervous about using that as a term. But anyway, if that was an experiment about putting art on the beach or putting art outside, placing it in the elements, this was an attempt to bring the elements indoors. So this is blind light, a cloud at about 1.5 atmospheres of pressure, at nearly 2,000 lux of light, a cloud 10 times the density of a standard cumulus cloud, inside a box that was about 11 meters square and 3.5 meters high. And this is the show at the Hayward that some of you may have seen, with people queuing up to cross that threshold, which was always open. And the minute you did cross it, you couldn't see where you were going. You couldn't see your own hand, you couldn't see your own feet, but you were immersed in this, you could say, total atmosphere. You were conscious, you were awake, you were alive, you could move, but you couldn't see where you were going. So this was total disorientation, total removal, if you like, of the condition of the coordinates of architectural space. And at the same time, you became these ghostly images for people on the outside as you came close to the edge and maybe held out your hand to touch the glass. This experience, on the one hand, sounds it sounds like some people said that was terrifying, because now I know what it is going to be like to be dead. Other people said, well, this was really extraordinary because suddenly I was in my own body but without a body, and in a space that was activated by all of the sounds of people often laughing as they come face to face. People would come into focus at about 12 centimeters. So on the one hand, this was a disorientating and alienating experience. On the other, you were meeting other human beings in at a level of intimacy, well, unusual in a public space. And I just thought that, I would just try and show you this little film that So this gives you some idea of what it was like in there. It was very, very white. Could we turn the sound up a bit? Because there is actually sound. Yeah. Yeah, a bit more sound. There's a slight muffledness to the, because it was very, very dense and very wet underfoot, it has to be said, because it was a rain cloud, so it was natural that it should precipitate. What was strange was it felt like a party, but you didn't know who was there. And people came out and said, what was in that cloud? I feel really strange, but in a good way. And
very frightening.
Oh yeah, this was one comment.
Not knowing where you're going. Where the walls are. Not knowing where you're going. It's a bit you lose yourself on purpose, isn't it?
Anyway, this could be a metaphor, couldn't it? You lose yourself on purpose in it. It's frightening, but in a good way. I think that idea that maybe the space of art is somewhere where somehow we discover parts of ourselves or each other that we wouldn't perhaps know were that space not available to us. I just wanted to end with the combination, if you like, of my interest in thinking about the body as a place and the conditions of architecture as one of the primary, in a way, reality contexts. So this was a model for a work called Model, in which I thought, well, why don't I make a building in a human form? So this is a building made out of about 24 cells, 3 of which are open, that you are invited to enter through the left foot. And here it is in the gallery. This is about, I think Andrew was quite glad when we didn't do that here. It wouldn't quite fit, is the truth, but this is about 35 meters long, 5 meters high, made out of sheet steel. And the minute you go in, it's the absolute opposite of blind light. You're in relative darkness. But within those spaces, there are places where you can sit and watch other bodies as they make their way through the space. And there are places of brilliant illumination coming from those open tops. And I think this was simply a way of re-enchanting architecture for me. It has very strong references to really the primary spaces, whether those are inter-uterine or the cave, that in some senses modernity has released us from, but in which, I hope, that wasn't intended. I wanted people to explore themselves and each other through this agency. I think that it was the last slide. And I guess in wrapping up, you could say that this show here, Subject, has been about trying to do the same thing with an existing architectural context, but with light and with those wonderful changing conditions, or the dialogue between artificial and, well, on the days that we've had this week, unusually brilliant sunlight, and allowing people to think about the relationship between inside and outside, thinking about space not as, in a sense, contained, but as a continuum. And so that whole implication of coordinate, that these lines happen to be visible and materialized within these spaces, but by implication continuing into deep space, and thinking, or allowing us to think, in the manner of perhaps those people in Blind Light, of our journeys within space-time through the spaceships that are our bodies, as an adventure. And you might well ask, well, look, where is the art in all of this? It sounds like a kind of behaviorist experiment. Well, on one level it is, but I think the art is in the imagination and the collusion of imagination. I am always reminded of what Brancusi said, you know, when we are no longer children, we are already dead. That possibility of art being, in a way, a key to a sort of allowing for a kind of imaginative engagement that allows us to re-enchant and revalue our own experience. That seems to me, anyway, to be a valuable experiment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for a very inspiring talk. And I hope everyone agrees it was fantastic to be able to hear your thoughts about our show, but also think about those other works, and especially works that you were showing us that really activate the body, which I think was one of your hopes for this show. So would anybody like to ask a question? That was perfectly timed, by the way. So we've got some time, so do ask your burning questions. Well done, the first person over there.
Is there any relationship between this art and body psychotherapy? Because I can see some of the things being done in art now that I've only come across in body psychotherapy.
Oh, tell us a bit about body psychotherapy.
There's some psychotherapists in Cambridge who do that, special training, where they could be with people who are depressed or anxious, whatever, and they get them to sit in a different way, and they feel different. So it's about getting them to move their body in different positions, and it alters their mood or helps them to express a mood. You're using movement which are more positive. People aren't aware how much stuff are, how stressed they are, how rigid. So I just wondered if there was any relationship between movement and art.
I'm very keen on the idea of the therapeutic model for art. I mean, I think of my work is the way I tune my life in a way. All of that early work was made by moulding from me, or taking moulds of me, and that was literally, you know, a place, going to a place where somehow, I nobody else could come, that I was totally alone, but aware, alive, alert. And that became a kind of ritual or a kind of therapy. It was a place of, I mean, it's paradoxical, because it was on the one hand a place of safety, but also a place where I had, as it were, by an act of will, put myself totally in the hands of others. It was my wife that did most of the moulding for the first 15, 20 years. And that was a relationship of absolute trust. Because, yeah, when you're totally plastered I mean, in that way, you're in a vulnerable position. You can be made to do, I mean, well, to say things or promise things that, anyway, but never mind. You know, another great artist that I really admire, Joseph Beuys. You know, I think his whole story, whether we believe it or not, of being taken care of and wrapped in fat and felt, is a parable about trauma being healable through, in a way, a process, a physical process. And I still think of that, you know, the idea of healing, the idea of, yeah, being given. I mean, I'd like to, you know, say to everybody, look, just you don't have to do anything. You don't. You can move through the galleries, but you could lie on the floor. You can just watch the shapes of the sunlight on that wall. That actually this is a place where you can allow things to happen rather than being a witness of things happening. And everything that you say about bodily psychotherapy, I think connects to me with you know, I think the key to a lot of this was studying Vipassana meditation in India very intensively over 2 years, which is really just about bare attention to what is happening, and the primary vehicle for that is being conscious first of all of breathing and then of the body and how it fits together, and feeling in a way the pressure of the earth pushing up under your feet, and feeling the space within your lungs, feeling the follicles of your hair moving in the air. I mean, things that are really fundamental, but we live in such goal-driven, instrumentalized lives that somehow we often forget that. And I think if art can do anything, it should give us a place in which perhaps that notion of being itself and the ability to key into it. What does it feel like just to be alive, alert, aware through the agency of this space? And yeah, I think art often is I think it was, you know, if I think of all of my kind of heroes, or anyway artists that I deeply admire, whether it's Giacometti or Mondrian or Brancusi, there's no sense in which their work was not the the agency of their own, in a way, internal balance. They needed to make that. There was an internal necessity to make that, and I think that's true of all good art. It comes from somewhere very necessary for the maker. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Can I ask whether you've had any particular response from the architect to the installation?
He wrote me an email today.
Sort of three-dimensional perspective.
He just wrote me an email saying, would I allow a filmmaker that he admires to make a film of the show here. I mean, really, I think what he's saying is there's so little show that actually the architecture looks really terrific. There's not much in the way of the architecture. So I think that we both, well, it was right from the beginning, wasn't it, Andrew? It was seen as a collaboration. Jamie helped build our house and extended it in a very beautiful way. He's an old friend, and I think I don't think this was an attempt, as it were, to just do the least in order for Jamie to be the hero of the day, but that is in a way what's happened. But I really admire his attitude to architecture as a conversation, not a statement. He's somebody that really understands materiality. I think is immensely respectful, if you like, of the human history of a building and what it represents as a place. And I think that you'll see if you buy the little yellow book that we're going to publish very soon, you'll see that I think we have common interests, and it was a privilege really to work with this architecture. And I think what Jamie has done is he's provided those ambitious larger volumes that allow now Kettle's Yard to I mean, it is always punched above its weight, but now it has a punch bag to do it even better.
A quick plug for the book there, which has been nicely placed. So there is a catalogue forthcoming for this exhibition, which we hope will be here in about 3 weeks' time. And what Antony's referring to is there's a conversation within that catalogue between Antony and Jamie. And we also should say that you did come into Kettle's Yard when it was almost a building site quite early on, I do remember, and was sort of really interested in the claw space straight away. But we also asked Antony in the early stages of this project about the load bearings of our floors and walls. So we significantly increased them, but they still weren't strong enough for this exhibition. So any other questions? Ooh, quite a few. Okay, so we'll go here, and then Tom, and then this lady from
Just briefly,
Hello.
have you ever asked people who've been in these special places, like the cloud one, what their reaction is? Because, it could be quite dramatic. Do they come out of this feeling weird, or, it'd be very interesting.
Quite a few of them do come out feeling quite weird and with very curly hair. Some of the sponsors of my exhibition were a bit upset about their hair. But no, I mean, it's interesting. I'm absolutely convinced of the need to, as it were, have immersion and engagement. But I don't judge the success or failure of my works by, as it were, doing a poll of people's reactions. I think that's none of my business. Every one of these shows is a risk, and I think this one is as great as any, because some people just will not want to engage. They'll have a predetermined idea of what what it means to engage with art, and this won't maybe fulfill it, and they will not. They'll not immerse. But that's their loss, in my view.
Do you think that the bare space is ever adequate in like activating the viewer? So like in the main house, we're sort of immersed in it because you can sit on the chairs, you can take the book out, you could touch sculpture, get shouted at. But like in the galleries, your intervention is what activates the viewer. But do you think that works if there's no intervention at all? There's nothing. Is there ever a point where you can just be in a completely bare space and feel that same like activation?
Well, I think that a Tyrrell sky space does that, but you're told what to pay attention to, and I think that notion, when Yves Klein did his show at the Seat Gallery as pure creative space, I think that was his invitation. Come into this. It was an exhibition of the void. There was nothing there, but you were invited. This was another very clear example of an invitation to engage with pure imagination, you could say. I'm very interested, there's a lot of connection between this and Cage's 4-minute piano piece, or I think the Buddhist idea of sunyata, or a kind of active emptiness. This is not negation, this is possibility. And for me, that connects absolutely with I guess that question that I always ask. When you close your eyes, we can do this because it's worth doing. Let's just try it. When you close your eyes, where are you? That question, where are you? Well, you are somewhere, but it has no objects. It is not. Doesn't have any edges. We're kind of aware of a collective space that we're in, but somehow here we are immersed in a place with few qualities that we know from the visual world. Now, some people think of that space, you can open your eyes, as in a way, a negation. I think of the darkness of the body in some senses as the place of potential. I don't think of it as a fearful place. I think of it as a place of possibility. And I guess the relationship between art and religion comes in here. I think I was brought up a Catholic, but became increasingly interested in Buddhism because it's trying to deal without a symbolic order with the facts of existence, and the truth of suffering, not as the result of sin or kind of original sin, but just as the fact of having a body that is in some senses subject to time and entropy, and that actually coming to terms with that is what we have to do in life, and that's a journey, and using our lives positively in in the face of the inevitability of our death, and actually engaging with that process. I think that's really, it's a salutary but also very exciting adventure. And anyway, I think for me, sculpture has always had this relationship with time. It's always been a place in which I think human beings, in the knowledge of the provisionality of our thinking and feeling lives, want to use geological time to make a statement that somehow registers it for longer. And you know, there's been an enormous history of whether it's a standing stone that's raised on a tumulus, or you know, a finely wrought bishop carved out of limestone. The history of I think mortuary monuments is very embedded in sculpture, and I'm not interested in that in a morbid way. I just think that somehow sculpture, in its stillness and in its silence, is a point of reference to the living, and hopefully makes us feel more alive. I mean, that's the whole idea of this show. In a sense, you come into a space which isn't full of distraction, but you know, allows you to orientate your own journey through the time and space that you spend with it.
Question is here.
You studied here at Cambridge, and Edmund Duval read English here at Cambridge. If you had a youngster now, would you encourage them to read a subject, or would you encourage them to go to art school?
Gosh, what a difficult.
I'm sorry.
That's a wonderful question. I mean, I had a really wonderful time here, and I would always say, you know, if you can go to a place that's full of sensitive, intelligent, and kind of striving people that are thinking about the future in an interesting way, well, go there. But that's exactly what an art school should be too. And there's no reason why one should exclude the other. And certainly, you know, when I was here, the fact that there was an arts lab that the Duke of Gloucester had given over his house in I think it was off Mill Lane, to be an arts lab, and that was just so fantastic. We made films there. There was a dark room. There was a silkscreen thing. And anyway, in those days, you know, the artists in residence programs here were very rich. So I met Michael Craig Martin and Mark Lancaster, and through them Richard Hamilton and Barry Flanagan and a whole raft of other artists. The studio at King's was you know, Michael had one bit of it, but anybody could go and use the other bit. There was I mean, everybody was making films, everybody was making music, and I wonder whether that's died a bit here, and I regret that. I mean, I think the need, you know, I passionately believe that you know, Cambridge should be playing a leading role in the evolution of our visual culture, and there's no reason why it shouldn't with a place like this that has such an incredible track record of inspiring people. So I mean, I hope that the colleges will continue with the artists in residence. I hope that that studios will continue to be available, and I hope that what used to be the Cambridge Visual Arts Exhibition is revised, because it seems to have. Does anybody remember the Cambridge Visual Arts Exhibition? It used to happen once a year. Nobody remembers it. That's terrible. But anyway, it was good in its time, and I'm sure somebody ought to reinvent it.
Probably
one more question. Yeah.
Because you cast yourself many times over the years, what's your relationship with those different sort of aspects of yourself, and has that changed over time?
I think it's a curious thing. I mean, yeah, I'm a bit fatter and a bit more bent than I was 40 years ago. But I don't really, to be perfectly honest, I don't think that I own this body. It's on temporary loan. I'm trying to make it work for me, and it's been a very useful workshop, a very useful tool, and it's been quite a good subject for me. And I accept that it's changing, and there are things that I can't do now. There were things that I was able to do 30 years ago that I can't now. But we're not moulding anymore. We're scanning, which is a lot less messy, maybe slightly less therapeutic. But the funny thing is that I don't think about, you know, I am asked that question, you know, are you coming to terms with the fact that you're going to live less long than you have already lived, and does that bother you? I think I don't have time for that really. I've just got to get on with what needs to be done. And there's so many examples of, I mean, Richard Serra has done his best work, in my view, in the last 10 to 12 years. The talk to ellipses are just absolutely wonderful. And then you think of Matisse, lying in bed doing those vibrant and extraordinarily celebratory cutout works, because he couldn't stand up anymore. I think that artists just do keep going on the whole, and they don't really, their as it were biological circumstances aren't really forefront to their concerns. Good. Shall we call it a day with the image of Matisse surrounded by bright colours? Good.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Please join us outside for a glass of wine. And Antony, just our deepest thanks again for this really powerful exhibition, which, as you say, is full of possibilities, and for this fantastic lecture this evening. So please join me in